You finally did it, after months, maybe years, of saying yes when you meant no, of showing up when you were empty, of putting everyone else first until you couldn't remember what putting yourself first even felt like. You finally drew a line. You said, I can't do this anymore. I need this. This doesn't work for me. No. And you braced yourself because you knew it wasn't going to land well. You knew there would be pushback. You knew the person on the other side of that boundary wasn't going to celebrate you for finally standing up for yourself. But what happened next still surprised you. They didn't just push back. They called you selfish, and something in you, the part that has spent years trying to be anything but selfish, collapsed a little bit. Is this selfish? Is wanting something for myself actually as wrong as they are making it sound? And you started to backpedal, to explain, to soften the boundary into something that felt less like a boundary and more like a suggestion, to apologize for having needs in the first place. Carl Jung spent his entire career studying this exact dynamic, the relationship between boundaries, selfishness, and the psychological patterns that make certain people react to your self-protection as if it's a personal attack on them. And what he found is not what most people expect. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will never hear the word selfish the same way again. Part 1. What a boundary actually is. Before we talk about why they called you selfish, we need to understand what a boundary actually is, because most people have been given a distorted version of this. A boundary is not a wall. It's not a punishment. It's not a way of keeping people out or of withholding love or care. A boundary is information. It's a clear, honest communication about what works for you and what doesn't, about what you can genuinely offer and what you can't, about where your authentic limit is. Jung would describe it this way. A healthy boundary is the psychological membrane that separates yourself from other selves, the line between where you end and where another person begins. And this membrane is not optional. It's not a luxury for people who don't care enough. It's a necessity for anyone who wants to function as a whole, intact human being rather than as a psychological extension of everyone around them. Without it, you absorb everything. Everyone's emotions become your emotions. Everyone's needs become your responsibility. Everyone's problems become yours to solve. And eventually, there's no you left. Just a collection of other people's needs wearing your face. This is what Jung called the dissolution of the ego boundary, and he saw it as one of the most significant forms of psychological damage a person can experience. So when you set a boundary, when you said I need this, or this doesn't work for me, or no, you weren't being selfish. You were doing the most psychologically necessary thing a human being can do. You were maintaining the membrane that keeps you a person rather than a function. And the fact that someone responded to that with the word selfish tells you something important. Not about you, about them. Part 2. Why they called you selfish. Here's what Jung would say about the person who called you selfish for setting a boundary. They were not reacting to your selfishness. They were reacting to the loss of your selflessness. There's a crucial difference. Selflessness in the way it was operating in your relationship with this person was not just kindness. It was a structure, a dynamic, a system that they had built their expectations around. You being always available, always accommodating, always willing to put your needs aside for theirs, always saying yes when you wanted to say no. This structure served them, maybe not consciously, maybe not deliberately, but it served them. And when you set a boundary, when you changed the structure by saying no for the first time, you didn't just make a single request. You threatened the entire system. You said implicitly, the version of this relationship where I have no needs is over. I am a person with limits, and those limits are now part of the dynamic. And for someone who had organized their expectations around you having no limits, that felt like a loss, like something being taken from them, like you were withholding something they'd come to rely on. And selfish was the word they reached for to describe that feeling, not because it accurately describes what you did, but because it's the most effective word available for making someone feel guilty about prioritizing themselves. Jung had a concept for this. He called it the power shadow. The way people unconsciously use moral language, words like selfish, unkind, cold, uncaring, to maintain control over people who are starting to assert their own autonomy. It's not always deliberate. Sometimes the person genuinely believes you're being selfish, because from inside a dynamic where your selflessness was the norm, Any deviation from that norm can feel like selfishness. But feeling like selfishness and being selfishness are not the same thing, and understanding the difference is everything. Part 3. The shadow of the word selfish. Let's talk about this word specifically, because selfish is one of the most powerful and most misused words in the language of human relationships. Jung would look at the word selfish and ask, what is the shadow of this accusation? What is the person actually communicating when they use this word? Because here's what most people don't realize about accusations, particularly moral accusations, particularly the ones that are used in response to someone setting a limit or asserting a need. They almost always reveal more about the accuser than about the accused. When someone calls you selfish for setting a boundary, for saying no, for protecting your own energy and well-being, they are revealing something about their own relationship with selfishness. Specifically, they're revealing that they have suppressed their own needs so completely that seeing someone else honor theirs feels like a violation. Or they're revealing that they have their own selfish tendencies that they've pushed into their shadow, and seeing selfishness, even where it doesn't actually exist, activates something in them that's about their own unacknowledged patterns. Or they're revealing that they've been using your selflessness as a resource, and the loss of that resource, your no, your boundary, your assertion of your own needs, feels to them like theft, like you're taking something that belongs to them. None of these responses have anything to do with you actually being selfish. All of them have everything to do with what's happening in them. Jung wrote, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And the person who is intensely irritated by your boundary, who reaches immediately for the word selfish, is showing you something about themselves that, if they were honest, they'd rather keep hidden. Not because they're terrible people, but because they're human people with their own shadows and their own patterns and their own unexamined relationship with need and selfishness, and what they believe they are entitled to from you. Part 4. How selfishness looks like. Now I want to be honest here, because psychological honesty requires it. Not every person who sets a boundary is doing so in a healthy way. Not every no is automatically virtuous. Not every assertion of personal limits is automatically justified. There is such a thing as genuine selfishness, and it's worth understanding what it actually looks like, so that you can honestly assess whether what you did was a healthy boundary or something more complicated. Jung would describe genuine selfishness as the consistent prioritization of your own needs without regard for their impact on others. The inability or unwillingness to consider how your choices affect the people around you. The refusal to take responsibility for the consequences of your actions. A genuinely selfish person doesn't feel guilty about their selfishness. They don't lie awake wondering if they asked for too much. They don't backpedal and apologize and wonder if they were wrong to have needs. Does that sound like you? The very fact that you're watching this video, the very fact that you're examining whether your boundary was fair, is evidence that you are not operating from genuine selfishness. Genuinely selfish people don't ask whether they were too selfish. They don't feel the guilt that you're clearly feeling. They don't wonder whether they hurt someone by having needs. The person who lies awake after setting a boundary, worrying that they were wrong to do it, going over it again and again and wondering if they should apologize. That person is not selfish. That person is someone who has been trained to feel that any assertion of their own needs is an act of wrongdoing, and that training, wherever it came from, is worth examining, because it's the thing that makes the word selfish so effective as a tool for pulling you back. It works because you already believe it might be true, and it's not. So, let's learn what Jung's entire framework is pointing toward. The moment you set a boundary and they called you selfish was not a moment that revealed something wrong with you. It was a moment that revealed something important about them. It revealed that they had become accustomed to a version of you that had no limits, a version that was always available, always accommodating, always willing to put their needs above yours. And when you changed that, when you finally said, "Here is my limit," they experienced it as a loss, and they called that loss your selfishness. But here's the truth that Jung would want you to hold on to. A relationship that can only survive when you have no needs is not a relationship, it's a transaction. One where you provide and they receive, and the moment you stop providing in unlimited ways, the transaction collapses and they call the collapse your fault. Real relationships, the ones worth having, can hold your limits, can absorb your no, can survive your assertion that you are a person with needs and not just a resource to be drawn from. The people who respond to your boundaries with understanding, who say, "Okay, I hear you," even if they are disappointed. Those are the people worth investing in. The people who respond to your boundaries with your selfish, who make you feel guilty for having limits, who weaponize moral language to pull you back into compliance. Those are people showing you exactly what kind of relationship they are offering. One where you are welcome, but only if you agree to need nothing. And you deserve better than that. Not because you're perfect, not because every boundary you've ever set has been perfectly executed, but because you are a human being with needs that are as real and as legitimate as anyone else's. And the moment you finally owned that, the moment you finally said, "This is my limit," was not your worst moment, it was one of your bravest. Don't apologize for it, don't explain it away, don't let one word, spoken by someone who benefited from your limitlessness, convince you that knowing your own worth is the same as not caring about anyone else's. It isn't, and deep down, you already know that. Thank you for watching. If this resonated, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more content about psychology, boundaries, and the deeper patterns of what it means to be human. See you in the next one.